extremely nope, she's extremely supportive and but one of the things like not afraid to like, oh, you need a draft of something. She just kind of rips out a draft of something or is able to, create things. I would call it kind of servant leadership. That's definitely a style of leadership that I aspire to, but I think certainly I would say that the department chair certainly exhibits a lot of that. So that's what I would say. We could just kind of open it up for whoever wants to go, or I could call on people. We'll just see what happens here. I can just shut up and see if somebody has someone or something about leaders that inspires them.
I'll go.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
go ahead,
I
Bev.
think Bev, I think you were first. Well, Bev's throwing it over to you, Jenny.
I was just gonna say a positive leader is always someone that I tend to look toward. And by positive, I mean a lot of people are positive, but encouraging and pointing out the good things as they're happening and that sort of thing.
Positive leadership. Good. Bev?
I was going to say leader. I always feel like those that I've tried to model after are those that empower others. I think empower everyone to be the best of themselves and to contribute to the community.
Lovely.
I'll go.
I can
Let's-
share. I have a kind of a funny one, or it may seem funny, but when I was thinking about this, Reese Witherspoon comes to mind. Okay, so she's a powerhouse. We all know this, but she has done amazing things with the, talents that she has, and now like her energy out in the world. So she brings up a lot of women through her production company, which I think is really cool. So Bev mentioned empowering others, and that really made me think of her. She also has a book club, which, as a librarian, I think that's very cool. And she encourages people to read, but by doing that, she's also lifting a lot of different voices in the diversity of the titles she selects, which I think is also a really cool thing. So to me, I see her as a leader in the way that she does do things her way, but she also pulls a lot of people up as she's going. And I deeply admire that. So that's my little fun one for the day.
I didn't know that about her, so that's awesome. Thank you. Who else?
Pete had one.
I was just gonna say, I think the best leaders that I've had are people who are like in the trenches with me, who like understand the work that I'm doing and are willing to, like you said, Tom, jump in or also just lead by example. And I think of one leader in particular who is always giving like specific positive feedback. And I think sometimes just hearing good things that you're doing is really empowering and encouraging, and makes me want to continue doing good things. So I think just being able to, give that kind of specific, detailed response is really important.
Amen.
Something that Kate, you made me remember is just like the mark of the kind of person that I want to work for is somebody who would never ask their subordinates to do something that they aren't willing to do themselves. So, in public libraries and schools, it's a lot of times it's other duties as assigned. And those like cleaning up bodily fluids and salting the parking lot and doing the things that nobody told us that we were going to do or taught us how to do when we were in graduate school. That when I see someone in a management position or an administrative role that is willing to do those things, I think it speaks really highly to me of their integrity.
I agree. I think with what everybody's saying, and I think what I found, leaders that inspire me are ones that have good ideas, but they also are very, very well organized. And so it's not like I had a great idea last night, so let's put it into play the next day. But they're methodical in, I mean, they don't have to be type A organized, but they just keep things going. Like you rely on them to keep the apparatus moving. And, that requires a fair amount of, planning on their part. And I appreciate that.
Good
Yeah.
morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I appreciate a leader that is not intimidated by those that are around them that may have gifts, skills, and talents that they don't have, and that make room for others to become leaders or to lead from where they are. And then I also really love leaders who know when to utilize a particular leadership style. For a long time, I was like, I want to be a people-centered leader. I want to be a people-centered leader. I want to be a people-centered leader. And that's all I was, focused on. But what I realized is that there are some situations and circumstances where positional leadership has to come into play as well. And, it just does. But you have to know when to turn those things on and when to turn those off. And the person that I follow, that I love and adore as it relates to training other leaders, is Simon Sinek. He's just, oh my gosh, I adore him so much. You guys ever run across him? Just introduce
Very good. Yeah, and you said it. I think situational leadership is what you were referring to. That's a whole body of a whole philosophy of, matching your leadership style with people that you're trying to lead, because sometimes they need they need a lot of direction. Other times they just need encouragement and support. So really trying to decipher that is really important. So anybody else?
I think this has come out in what several other people have said, but I always look to people who have the ability or the willingness to surround themselves with excellence, with excellent others. So not needing to be the one with all the knowledge, not needing to be the smartest one at the table, not, like ideally you want to not be that person. You want to surround yourself with the very best and let them do what they do. To me, that's powerful leadership.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, what kind of resonated with me was, I don't know if anybody's read Team of Rivals. It's a book about Abraham Lincoln and his leadership, and he not only surrounded himself with really smart people, but he surrounded himself with people that really disagreed with him, and it created a healthier environment. And I think a lot of times we get into situations where we want everybody to agree with the leader, and then bad decisions get made. That's called groupthink. Yeah. So Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote that. You guys are all readers, and I love it. Anything else? We don't have to have all go around, but if anybody has anything else they want to contribute. Jatem's putting on her stocking hat. Okay, well, that's good enough for me. Adam, April, I'm going to hand it over to you.
That's great. Really, really great discussion. Great warm up. My brain feels warmed up. All right. So yeah, we thought we would get a little bit into our purpose for today. So so to start, I put it out there not as a starting bid, but see what you all think. That our focus is really to get increased clarity on our end goal. So outcomes, is the next step before, so that we can then get into methods. Our methods would then support our outcomes. But tell me what you all think, reflecting on our last conversation or where we're at. Does this sound like the right focus, or would you shape this statement in any way to refine it better? Or, if you want to get your brain going then on why would it matter if this is the right focus, then why does it matter? What would that mean for us if we did that? Why is it important?
I guess if we knew what our outcomes were and we aligned on those outcomes, then we would start figuring out what the actions we might need to take to start working towards our outcomes.
Right? I'm gonna butcher that interaction between Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat about, you know, which way should I go? Well, it depends. Where do you wanna where are you heading? And I don't really know. Then it doesn't really matter which direction you go. See, I butchered it, but you get it. All right, good. Thank you. Why else does it matter for us to have increased clarity on our end goal?
So that we have a higher likelihood to sustain this collaboration after the consultancy is over.
Mhm.
Good. Okay. Is that right? Good. I don't know why my typing is so bad today, but thank you. Good. One more at least, or anybody have one more?
We have some from Katina in the chat.
Oh, okay. Can't see it.
So it looks like it gets us to the activities we need to do. So I think that was kind of taken care of in bullet point 1, but enables us to communicate to the wider community. I think is an important one, reminds me of our last conversation. And we can confirm if we're on the right track with the larger community. Yeah. You know, last time we were talking about like, we can't really share what we're doing with the community because we don't know yet. So now we're answering that question, you know, and that'll help us get to a lot of other important topics.
All right, fantastic. So that really helps clarify what is our focus, why does it matter, and combined that gives us a sense of purpose. What outcomes by the end of the meeting today would help us feel like we've accomplished that? We have increased our clarity toward our end goal. What would tell you that?
I know for me, this is a meeting where I think we're going to really unpack the article on coalitions. And so I'm really anxious to hear how people feel about kind of the end goal of the coalition and how much coalescing everybody wants to do. So I know that's an outcome that I'm particularly interested in.
Mhm.
I'm making up a word, coalescelize. I think coalesce will suffice. Good, great. Other outcomes.
I'm
I'll
glad
throw
for
out-
us
oh.
to
Yeah.
settle on some of the outcomes. Because I think that then guides us to the next level of work. And kind of we have this target. I think we're anxious to do something. So this might put us in a position to actually, you know, do some things.
Let me know if this doesn't, if anybody that feels like I'm not capturing, feel free to correct. All right. Any other outcomes for today?
I just think that we're at the point where we have outcomes that are like community-wide, city-wide, coalition-wide, organization-wide, specific to elementary schools, specific to city, you know? So I feel like we, through this process, can attempt to right size what it is we're trying to do in a way. Because right now I feel like I'm not really sure if we're going for a citywide metro effort or something less unwieldy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that today.
And excuse my background noise. I have lots of children at home today.
To me, that's kind of like one of the great things about being able to work in this way. So yeah, awesome. Good. I hope I captured that as well. Other outcomes. April, did you have one? Okay. All right. I think that definitely gives us a lot to shoot for. So here's the agenda we had in mind. Obviously, we have to make sure the agenda will help produce these outcomes. So keep that in mind as well, maybe it will be handier if I just grab it and move it over there now. So the idea would be, if we follow this agenda, would it lead to these outcomes? And I forgot to ask, do these outcomes reflect our purpose? But you get the point of all that. For the sake of moving forward, let's just see what we have in mind. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the flipped classroom here in a little bit. Just get your thoughts on anything from the video, and really, how does that relate to the work we're doing? That's why we're doing the flipped classroom, is really bring the meaning into the work we're doing in these meetings. All right. Debrief the reading around coalition structures and what's involved with that, and levels of integration, and some thoughts to get us really delving into very important topics, which we'll need a break after doing that. And then we'll get into reviewing and finalizing the purpose statement. We've allowed 15 minutes. We'll see if we need all of that, because here the groups will then be presenting their draft of their outcomes to each other. And then from there will be affinity diagram, which will be clustering those into related groups. So hopefully that produces a clearer picture of our outcomes. So if we do those things, would it help us explore together the end goal of the coalition, the degree to which we want to coalesce? Will it help us settle some of the outcomes that will guide our work, so we can begin taking some actions? And then will doing this help us right size the scope of what we're trying to do? Does that agenda work? All right. I see no comments in the chat. I see some agreements among your faces. So with that, we shall proceed. Good, good, good. All right. So that brings us to our flipped classroom. So, just this idea here of this image is basically that, here we have leadership and authority just sort of mingled together. We just talk about them and we cluster them together and we treat them like they're the same thing. And what I'm trying to do is tease them apart. We have some authority from leadership, and now they're separate concepts. And that's what I'm trying to do. Not to say one is better than the other. I think they're just different. Authority is something that comes with one's position, title, role, and one should be good at knowing what that is and exercising it. Effective use of authority is important. Not abuse of authority, and not underuse of it either when it's needed. And that leadership is not that. That leadership's an activity, and I can do the activity sometimes or not. Authority, as long as I'm in that position, I have the authority. And then leadership is an activity I choose to do. I'm not always doing it. I may not even think to do it. I may be reacting. I may be the person in authority, but I may be responding to someone else's leadership. So I just put this this graphic up there to remind you, shrink it back down. I'm still just teeing this up for you all to comment. I will be quiet. You see some of the questions here, your reflections, what aligned with you, what contrasted, how do the concepts relate to our work? How can we advocate without formal authority? A question I thought of too, have you ever thought you were in a leadership conversation, but you were in an authority conversation with someone else who had the authority? All right. And then, your leadership bumps into authority, and what happens? And then any of the capacities, because I just mentioned them. I just did short ideas about things that I think would help enhance the activity of leadership. All right, so that's really it. I just want to open it up to you all now. It's flipped. The classroom is now flipped.
I remember when I was very, very young, my parents could have started me a year ahead in school, but they opted not to because they wanted me to be one of the oldest in my class, so I would be a leader. And turns out that has nothing to do with it. And so from like that point on, like I was like, I guess I just don't have, I just don't have leadership qualities. I guess that's just like not part of my personality. I'm always going to be kind of like a weird kid, and no one really wants to follow the weird kid. So I really appreciate how this disentangling of authority and leadership has, like, talking about it like it is not just as some kind of inherent quality that some people have and some people don't. And that it's possible that it's something that's a skill you can practice. Just like if I want to get better at drawing, then you have to practice. You know, if that's something that you think, well, I can't do that. I was like, maybe you could do that but you really have to practice more than other people, you know?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, both as I was watching it and then like for days. I've had I think that phrase I was in leadership into it is like some people are born leaders and others have leadership thrust upon them or whatever. I always felt like I was in positions where everyone just turned and looked at me like, okay, what, like set the path. And I'm like, well, shit, if no one else is going to, then like I'll be the leader. But what's, you know, I've been in positions across 3 different schools, and they've functioned very differently. And the one that I felt was most successful was really the one where I felt that a large number of people in the community rose up as leaders in different moments or situations. And I remember thinking through that time, like, I wonder why we focus so much on the concept of leadership rather than the concept of membership. Like, how do we build great members of a community or a team so that each one knows how to exercise, like to Lauren's point, their leadership when it's helpful, when it's needed. So those were the things that kind of came to mind for me.
I think that's really cool, Kristen. I can relate to that idea, and it makes me think about how it talks about leadership as an activity, that if we are thinking about it in terms of membership, then looking for opportunities to, you know, lead in different moments and different ways, and, you know, think about how effective and powerful our school systems would be if everyone felt like, you know, I'm leading this element today, but it takes the pressure off that you're not the constant leader. You're not one that's always steering the ship, but that I need your leadership in this way. And it's almost like helping people, like you talk about with StrengthsFinder, figuring out like, I'm really good at this. And I know, you know, in my days as an assistant principal, I kind of through COVID realized, wow, I was really good at these elements of leadership, but I wasn't great at these other ones. So then I was like, all right, I'm done with that. I'm happy. I don't want to go on a long diatribe, but I'm happy where I am now. And I do recognize I'm happier leading initiatives than I am, you know, steering a ship. But I think there is something to that idea of, instead of capital L leaders, you know, maybe it's lowercase leaders in different capacities.
I spent a lot of time thinking about my first role in like an administrative capacity, where I was both a mentor and a manager. And you cannot be both of those things successfully. So it made me think a lot about leadership in terms of that particular role, and how like the mentorship piece of it was really natural to me, and creating relationships with my teachers. But then when I had to put on the leader hat or the manager hat, you know, that sort of authoritarian thing, it just did not, it was uncomfortable. And that the model that the particular school that I was involved in was using seemed really backward. Like, it took me many years of like being within that system to realize like that's really not it's not maybe the best way to do it. And I think that idea of, lowercase leaders and like, using everybody's strengths in those capacities. But yeah, I really struggled thinking about that idea of like too many people see leadership as like not group success, but more singular. And it just made me think back to that particular role and how much I struggled with it. Now that I'm away from it, I'm like, okay, I'm able to see it a little more clearly. But I think that idea between, authority versus leadership and mentorship versus authority, like I really thought a lot about that.
Often ask, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we function the way we function? Like, where did this whole notion come from? And so when I think about it, I think it's a very male-driven, hierarchical, patriarchal system for us to operate in. And so we have to be intentional about debunking and restructuring, dismantling, and then rebuilding something in its place. And I think that all lies at all of our feet, no matter where we are. And so that's one thing. But I also think it's very caste. Like when we think about leadership, it really reflects caste systems. And like, that individual ascension to authority and getting the kudos for doing all the work and, all of the things that we have traditionally known leadership to be. And what, like Kate said, what we realize oftentimes is that it doesn't work. It is not successful for the majority of the people. And to Lauren's point, it then makes people feel like or believe that they inherently can't be this thing, right? Which messes with their self-esteem, their self-worth, the way that they see themselves navigating in their workplace, in their whole lives, like all over. And so I love the fact that we can say, like, this is a learned behavior. Some people may have to work at it a bit more than others, but there's room for all of us to lead in the spaces in which we occupy if we walk into it knowing that we can. And but I also believe like some things can be both and, not either or. And so like, where are the good things in that historical and traditional model of leadership? And then in its failings, what can we replace those parts that don't work with? And then ultimately you create a workable solution. And so, that's what I like about this whole theory around leadership and things like that. Kind of fun. Because I think it just gets to the human existence.
And very much, Katina, you're reminding me of like something that we used to talk about in my undergraduate gender studies courses, was just like, how do you work with systems that are still operating under this under a bureaucratic institution that is innately is harmful and has caused harm, but like we're all working in them still. And how can we actually separate ourselves from that? And can we actually make change when we are still using some of these tools?
It makes me think of one of my first positions right after college. I had to manage like 16 states, and I was the first Black woman in that position. And so even my way of looking, and y'all probably will see some traits in here because I've noticed how some things have carried over. So when I first started, I worked with like populations. I was a token. It took me a while to realize that because I managed all like people of color programs. And so I was like, I'm the first Black woman in this organization. Okay, y'all ready to do the work. And now I have Native folks and Latin folks and Indigenous, I have all these folks that I'm supervising. So I'm community set minded. Could be because, and I always think of this too, maybe it's because I'm the eldest grandchild of 18. And then so I was just kind of like, what does everybody want? Let's think. Well, I don't know what the thing was. But the way my thought process went was like, everybody could speak at the table. And, but sometimes I will notice I have to, and I did this with this group, when the consultants were interviewing us, And they're just kind of like, so where do you fit in? I was like, well, a couple of places. Are we trying to eradicate illiteracy for everyone? And do we have the same definition of what everyone is? Because I'm like, are we bringing people to the table? Are we remembering them as we continue to do the work to make sure at least their voices of what we've heard is at the table? And if we're not, then let's back up, because I don't want to be a part of that role, because we're going to end up having to come back to it anyway, right? Like, and so my mind is like, okay, well, you're not there, then let me back up, because we will get there in my experience of working with community, family setting, or whatever. We're going to touch base of who's not at the table. So we can do it on the front end, or we can do it on the back end, or we can go back and forth, which is, I think, usually what happens. Like, who else is not here? Let's make sure that they're at the table. But I remember in that first job, all the folks that I was supervising said in a board meeting, they were like, your team's going to get burnt out. Because one thing that I learned about someone who is in a leadership role, who is considered a community or family or whatever systems that are at play, we forget ourselves. So here I am just like, so this group want to do this? Okay, and this group want to do this? Okay, and this group want to do this? And you're running around inclination to say, Jatane, what do you feel? And I still wrestle with that, because like, I serve at Front Porch Alliance Eastside Community. I also live on Eastside Community, but I don't take in consideration, well, what are your thoughts? Because I understand power dynamics. You run an organization that has programming is $1.4 million, of programming. So with that said, it's like always reflecting, always thinking about what is your role, what is your space, and what does leadership look like? Doing the very things that y'all are saying. Are you able to be a supportive person? Are you able to be the leader? Like, when the process goes too long, are you able to be like, this is as far as we're going to go with this process. Now I'm going to take the executive hat to be like, and we're taking a step, not circling. We're not going to take a step forward to try it instead of being safe and continue to discuss and communicate with one another what our thoughts are. And so when I think of leadership, for me at least, how it showed up is that it is forever evolving and changing, and you have to be mindful of all the things that you juggle with it, because everyone is coming to the table at different aspects of what the term means. And some might think it's power and control and dictating. And I don't know about y'all, but over my years of supervising folks, it's interesting when someone gets promoted and they think that supervisors or managers essentially just tell other people what to do. I was like, oh, bless your heart. It's like herding cats. Like, y'all, here's where we are. Here's where we're trying to get. Let's continue to do the work, because most people, if they understood the nuances that go into leadership of meeting people where they are and like literally walking with them along the way, you would throw your hands up, because it's just kind of like, what did we get off the checkoff list? Like, what did I accomplish today other than making sure you feel good? You feel good. And now we, if anything, from Open the Table, we have more questions than we did when we started. So that's the part of leadership that I am still working on. I'm just like having the patience, but still being mindful that we have to continue to move outside of the circle. And also taking consideration of who's not at the table, but even being mindful of you are also at the table. What are your thoughts, feelings, attributes that you can bring to this conversation?
All right. Yeah, this is, we need to talk more. We have more time for leadership conversations. This has been, quite powerful and raised so many topics. I do want to emphasize my purpose is to liberate leadership from positional authority, power dynamics. So terms like white supremacist don't fit with what I'm talking about with the activity or misogynist. Those things exist and they are in power dynamics. And if we don't ourselves internally know how to distill those two concepts from each other, we sacrifice both. We lose our ability, we confuse what authority we have and what to do with it, and we forget the non-positional attributes that help us take actions that evoke positive reactions from others. So that leadership, like any other activity, it could be impaired by others, sure, but truly, like like the performance of the activity does come from within, and that's what I'm trying to clarify, because when we confuse them, we also lose agency, because in power dynamics, if we confuse leadership with power and we don't have the power, we lose we feel like we don't have the agency there. And that's true within the hierarchical system, but it's not true within the activity, the ability to perform, practice, and improve upon. And in fact, some of the oppressions of hierarchical institutions have revealed some of the greatest acts of leadership, from those who didn't have the authority. And we celebrate those. We literally, the good people of the planet, honor them, and so they kind of, those actions of leadership, they distinguish themselves from authority. I'll leave it there. There's a lot. Okay. But actually the most important takeaway is, how are we embracing leadership to do this thing we know needs to be done in our community? And that kind of segues into that next piece. Is that okay if we do that? Okay, cool. April, I shall give it to you.
Yeah. No, I loved that conversation. It's clear that everybody has really been thinking a lot about this topic of leadership, and how it relates to their own lives. And yeah, I just want to reiterate, this conversation is kind of a bridge, taking kind of those more theoretical ideas about leadership to, how we're really thinking about leadership within this coalition. And I just want to, let me just say openly, I want to come out of this conversation with you all feeling empowered as leaders for this vision, like advocates, leaders of this vision, that the coalition is creating together out in the community. And nobody's gonna, probably nobody's gonna knight you and say you are hereby, endowed with the authority to run with this vision and inspire others and move mountains to get, resources aligned. But I hope that you all can feel that, that is a choice that you can make. That is something that I hope that we are helping to enable each other to do through this process. But it's also a little tricky, right? Like, you're also members of your own organizations. You're also leaders in some sense within your own organizations. So we have different identities as leaders as well. And what does it mean to be a leader for your organization? What does it mean to be a leader within the coalition, within the community? And so I think through this conversation, I hope that some of those themes will kind of come out for further discussion and reflection. But yeah, if you can go ahead and share the screen, Adam, I'll run through just a couple kind of refreshing thoughts about the coalition reading. I thought it was a really great resource that we came across, the Coalition Building Roadmap. And I think there's a lot in there that's applicable to our process. So we will be doing kind of sections of readings from that over the next couple of weeks. But I wanted to just get us started, and yeah, you can go to the next slide, focusing on the 3 key assessments as we're starting to get into outcomes and methods to really help to determine, what is it we're going for? What does it mean to be a coalition? What does this really look like? What is the actionable pathway to get from this reality that we are in now as these distinct organizations that have a vision to actually create something that is a more intensive partnership for collective impact. So yeah, I'm hoping through this discussion, some of that will come out. But the 3 key assessments that I wanted to just touch on today, first was evaluate the current community environment to determine readiness and openness to change. So this one, and I'm just going to run through it quickly, I think we've done a lot of good work on this topic already. The diagram on the right there talks about the 4 kind of factors that need to be in place to ensure that there is readiness in the environment for some sort of intervention, collective impact intervention. So leadership, are there leaders, very relevant in the community, that want to run with this idea and can be effective advocates? Is there a history, so for environment, is there a history of collaboration? Are there cross-sector relationships? This is what we've been doing. This has been the work that we've been doing, is building this leadership, building this cross collaborative, environment that we can do this work in. And of course, urgency. I don't think anybody anywhere would argue that literacy is not an urgent topic. So, that just sort of leaves resources, which is really more of a method. Can we tap into those resources? And I think, we're all confident that, if we all work together, that we can achieve that, or at least that's, I'm gonna assert that as an assumption that we can debate more if you'd like. How do we define community? Yeah, I think we've been talking a lot about that in our vision statements. But did you have a comment on that in particular, Katina?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
My computer wasn't cooperating for a minute. I just wondered in general, like, as we read through this, because my first reading, I was like, oh, community, larger community outside of us. But then the second reading in context, as I thought about us coming together as a coalition, was I thinking about community as in this group of individuals and organizations? And I just wondered if anyone else, thought about it both ways, thought about it one way versus the other, just because I think that's important as we think about it. Because then I made notes about like, oh, if this maybe work, we still need. So I'm just wondering what other people thought about in terms of community, larger or external. I'll say that. Anyone? Bueller?
Okay, I feel like I have to answer because that's my maiden name, Bueller. Truly is.
Oh my gosh.
So I kind of thought of it as our impact on the committee, on the community, how we work together, and then how we impact the larger community. So kind of both.
Yeah, I would say probably my read of it was, we're looking at the larger community of stakeholders, in the Kansas City area as defined by, the vision statement that we're hoping to align to be able to, put resources toward achieving literacy across the lifespan. So this is the body that is, definitely community within the coalition is a whole important topic in itself. But I think in terms of preparing the environment, I think it is also a little bit of both. Like, are there people that are willing to do this, which I think you all are demonstrating? And then, is there willingness, is there kind of ready stakeholders in the larger, circle that can be brought in and aligned?
What this made me think also is that after reading this, I know there's been some other organizations that have asked why are they not in this group, and so this made me wonder, do we have everyone here that we need, and how are we going to expand so that people feel like they weren't left out at the beginning of this conversation, and how do we make it so that we can have other people join and make them feel like, yes, we need you in this community, and not be left out.
No, it's a real question, Bev. And I think, that's something that we've come back to in a lot of our meetings as something that's very central. I'm going to reiterate where I think we left off, which was, this is going to be something that's front and center as soon as we figure out what we're forming. So as we get to the outcomes, then we'll be able to articulate that, and we'll be able to we'll get into the methods of how we can bring people into it. But Adam, you had a comment.
Yeah, on that. Yeah, this is exactly the issue we were talking about last time, community transparency. And I reflected on it too since we had that conversation. And I don't know, this might be too like simple, but I was thinking there's not a problem because we haven't created the coalition yet. So what we're hearing is, oh, that the NIA project, or I don't know if I'm saying it right, NIA project, or yeah. Oh, you're interested. Oh, awesome. Thanks for letting us know that I'm going to bring that back to this group because we're part of what we're doing is forming a search party of allies. You want to be an ally? You want to be part of this? Awesome. Yeah, let me get you. So in a way, what I want to say is they haven't missed anything. What they've missed is the part that people should mostly want to miss, which is figuring out what we're doing, you know? No, it's nice when like that people want to be part of this, that you all wanted to be part of this. So it's not, so they're not missing anything as far as I'm concerned. And every single minute we've met is recorded. You know, it's going to be a hit show, I think. You know, it's going to be, you know, the literacy experts of Kansas City, you know?
And I'm going to chime in too and say that I agree with Adam. I don't think that they're missing out necessarily on anything, but I also think that if we come up with, okay, here's what we want to do and our outcomes, it goes back to the discussion and the question of leadership and authority. Like we are the leaders and the ones with authority in the community, you know what I mean? And I think of credibility, which we have because we've been showing up and doing this work and leading this work and leading the charge and spend the resources, find the resources, spend the time, build the coalition, build the relationships and trust with each other to show that we're serious about this, you know. And then the other thing is that it comes from a combination of credibility and expertise. And we also have a level of expertise in this room that the community can look to and say, yeah, you guys are the ones that should be doing this. You guys are the ones that we want to follow or that we want to be a part of this group because you guys have been doing it and we trust you, you know? So if we do have a level of transparency, like Adam's saying, like, here, watch all the meetings, here, watch the discussions. This is awesome. We want everybody's voices to be heard. But then, you know, you also have to say, okay, at what point, I think that Jitem was talking about it earlier, at what point do you stop talking, you know, which I call circle moments, like, okay, this is a circle moment where we all talk and talk and talk and then decide together, and or take that next step, which we call a triangle moment, right? Like somebody needs to make the decision for the group to move forward. And so I think if we have the credibility, we have the expertise, we have the trust, you know, then people, we hope, right? Not that they should or shouldn't, but they're going to feel however they feel, but we should have done the footwork to show everyone that we are credible enough to make compassionate, well-informed decisions on behalf of, you know, the people that we have invited into the conversation thus far. So I just feel like we're doing the footwork, man, you know, and hopefully people will see that and want to come along.
I really appreciate that, guys. I know it is a really important topic. And I think, you know, as soon as we're able to, you know, as Jillian is saying, you know, be able to articulate and have a framework to bring people in some sort of way that makes sense, that will be, I think, honestly, a first priority of this group, it sounds like. So it's definitely something that we haven't forgotten about. And I appreciate that I think it's important we keep coming back to this topic and taking, you know, temperature of where people are at and what the environment's like and what feedback we're getting. So I hope you all can feel comfortable bringing any like hard conversations you're having with people, or you're not sure how to do messaging around it or whatever else, as we've already been doing.
Can I be, I guess I'm feeling like what's in my head is a little bit of a devil's advocate. I don't know, or just I'm filled with angst and worry this week. I don't know, but I keep going back to, gosh, over a year ago, I think, when Jillian brought, it was the whole "we must think audaciously" conversation, which was wonderful and set us on this path. But I remember vividly one of the statements you made, or that we all engaged in around conversation, is like, we are, you know, we are all successful leaders of nonprofits that have been receiving grants and checking the boxes and hitting our marks and doing what we said we would do to get those grants, and nothing is changing. And I worry a lot that this group is insulated in the way we think about problem solving and the way we've conceptualized this work. And that if we don't very quickly welcome in not just other literacy groups, but a much broader sector of the community to think through what have we not even begun to touch? What can our efforts not do until the mountain of other challenges that we all know are out there are addressed? Or how do we flip the way we think about this on its head and tackle literacy in a completely different way? And, you know, what if all of our focus on the schools has shifted all this strength and power away from helping families, which is going to be much more powerful? You know, like, I worry a lot that we're all really good at something and it's getting in our way.
Kristen, you tapped into exactly what was going through my brain when our breakout group met last week to kind of like refine our outcome points, and I was trying to articulate it, and I don't think I did a very good job of it, but you did, where when we were trying to come up with outcomes for our strategic plan, I was looking at it and was like, these all look very, a lot of them looked very like initiative based. And we've been starting new initiatives and been starting new projects. And how can we come up with outcomes that, you know, speak to something beyond what we've already done and what we already do?
I agree. I was thinking about in the document how it talked about a goal of a coalition is to fill a community service gap that can't be filled by any one organization. And instead of just thinking, gosh, we had unlimited time and resources and personnel, we would do this and this would fix the problem, backing up even further and saying, we don't know what's going to fix the problem. Has anyone really put a dent in this issue in a significant way? We've got lots and lots of ideas. I think all of us have tons of ideas of new things to try, new populations to tap into. But and coming back to that, you know, who else isn't part of the discussion? It just makes me think about that phrase, nothing about us without us. And who is the us? You know, Katina asked the question, who's our community? And I don't know an answer. I'm just putting it out there. It's just in my head, and I don't know.
I would like, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
I would say, Kristen, one thing that came to mind as you were talking, it was like, you said, essentially, we've been doing these initiatives. We've all been, look how many organizations are present. And even the focus, even on the school district, I would say, my opinion, like, I don't even think we should go through the school district. Like, that's a whole other beast in a system that's hard to crack. But I'm willing to be a part of the coalition. We'll figure it out together. With that said, though, one thing that I know that we haven't done is that we've been siloed as organizations. And so when me and Jillian was talking the other week about like our outcomes, the same thing came to mind for me of like, yes, we could say, oh, we're going to go from the government perspective, from education perspective, and all of these. But one thing we haven't done as individual organizations, or even as a collective addressing a systemic or a community need, is together, like being so flexible to say, Kristen, you have this age group where you fall off, Jatane will pick up, like, and being that like forthcoming and having that to drive our initiative, because that's going to be hard as hell. It's going to stretch each of our organizations, but that is where you don't replicate what's already been done. that in itself means we are creating a whole new structure and system. But it then goes back to that question of what is a coalition and what is your willingness, I forgot the quote, the willingness for your organization or for you to go back to your board, like, this is where we're gonna have to shift a little bit, because where Katina stopped with programming, our organization will fit right next to it, but that means that we might have to change the population in which we interact with, or that might mean we continue the work, but instead of being a flat surface and saying we're serving all people, we have to have a specialty of whatever strengths we have, right? And so that's where, in my mind, it goes is, I don't think we've done it, because all of us are still comfortable outside of, meeting weekly, but all of us are still comfortable where we're at and what we're doing. And the whole purpose is none of us need to be comfortable, because it's a whole new arena.
Agreed. And I think we then also are going to have to be pushing some of those other potential coalition members, our allies, our support organizations, be it funders, especially. Because I was just at a event at the end of last week, and this funder made this announcement. Hey, we have these work groups, but you have to be a current educator in order to be a part of these work groups. And I was like, really? Because there's a whole group of folks that are doing this work, and you just iced us out when perhaps we bring something different to the table when discussing this particular issue, which was literacy. And I was really surprised to hear that announcement, one, and I wanted to kind of challenge it, but I couldn't in that environment, but I will. But we have to push without being afraid too. And I think that that's where, like, if we're going to be drivers of the ship on behalf of community, and they entrust us to do this work and do it well, then we're going to have to be unafraid in a lot of ways. And I think our power comes in the strength of the coalition. So yes, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable is going to be key. And kind of turning the Titanic in a different direction, because here's the thing. When I think about, we're only going to let current educators or schools and school districts participate, in my mind I was like, well, they ain't got it right yet, so what the hell, like, why? And then the same thing when I speak the way I speak, but like, I'm like, if you been even an organization that has been addressing this issue, and we're consistently seeing the numbers decline versus improve, like, we just got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, this shit is not working, and we have to do something different. And don't be afraid. Like, I think fear, it has a grip. And I'm just like, well, y'all know me. I always say, blow everything up and start again. Like, let's go with it. So I just think we have to keep those things in mind. And those are tough questions, because we want to say, yes, we've been here and we've done this, and blah, blah. But what's the result of that?
Yeah.
Well,
and while we've been here and been doing this work, I'm sorry, have we equally been supported in doing the work? Has there been equity there? And I think that's another real question too.
Or in supporting each other. Yes.
All right, thank you guys. I know I owe you a break. So Lauren, if you had one more comment, and we'll stop there for now and pick it up.
Yeah, when we were talking about support, and specifically from leadership, and what are we comfortable addressing, like where is our comfort level? Where is our willingness to take things to a government level? Whether I have mixed feelings about our elected representatives and the governmental organizations that are supposed to be caring for their constituents, but also, like, so many of the things that we are talking about need to be addressed on really big levels. And our, historically, Turn the Page KC has, kind of attached its name to some ballot measures that were not successful and were flawed. before Kristen and I were a part of that team. And, you know, like how much do we see participating in that scope of the field as an outcome of this group? I'm not saying one way or another that we need to or not, but that's something we should think about. Okay, let's break.
This is great, guys. Yeah, no, there's so much that's coming out of this discussion. This is all really helpful. This is part of the outcome brainstorming process, and there's a lot of complexity in that. I think, you know, I want to encourage people not to get into them stealing Adam's line. It's progress is always possible. Perfection is never possible. You know, we're not going to have a perfect list of outcomes by the end of today's meeting, but starting to throw ideas on the wall, seeing the patterns, seeing how far this group of brains gets us, because as Shatem said, this is the great experiment of the coalition. It's bringing us together as a group for the first time. So we're collectively looking at it. And yeah, I don't think we think that this is going to be enough to get us to, you know, the outcomes that we want to get to. We want to bring in more people, but I'm excited to see, you know, what we're able to put our heads together and create together. And I think we're already surfacing a lot of really important issues. So I'm going to give us 5 minutes and we'll come back and keep talking about coalitions. Thanks, guys. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, well, while Adam's coming back, I'm happy to pick things up a little bit. I want to go ahead and present a few more concepts to you guys to get through a little bit of the content. I think that will present and give us a workable framework for some of what we've been talking about, and then we'll open it back up for discussion. So if you have thoughts as I'm going, just jot them down. We'll have time to talk about it. But yeah, I think we want to just get through a little bit more of this content, essentially kind of refreshing everyone's memory from the reading. Adam, would you mind sharing our slide again? Great. So I think we've had pretty good discussion around that point number one, looking at the community environment, which is really so important. But again, I think, really, I think we're pretty confident that we have, that more or less in place, or we could get it. We see, that as potentially, a feasible ask for Kansas City. The next one, determining whether a coalition is the right model to tackle the challenge. I think the definition provided in the reading was really helpful, just in kind of wrapping your head around like what is a coalition and what is collective impact. So, it talked about having a coalition, which was necessary to allow multiple organizations across sectors to work together on a common agenda to address complex, challenging, and specific community issues that impact a broad range of community members. And, I don't know about you guys, I think that fits more or less with, our brief of what we're trying to achieve. We've talked a lot about our vision, and in order to really create that literacy across the lifespan goal and manifest it in Kansas City, we are going to need collective impacts. It will take everybody, pulling together to work on a common agenda. I thought Jatem did a really beautiful job of explaining how, we all need to fit together as puzzle pieces to align, our resources and in ways that we have never done so before. So, I think in terms of the focus on the coalition, we'll of course have more conversation about that, but in general, it seems like a good fit. What I'd like to focus a little bit more on and really put our finger on is this third assessment, assessing the capacity of your organization to meaningfully participate. And, I think this is something, as we've talked about before, you all are going to be wearing multiple hats. You are members of this coalition, but you're also representatives of your organization. And so that those two identities, may not play well together. And so I just want to, shed some light on that and let us flesh that out a little bit. Could you share the next slide, Adam? So the reading talked a lot about organizational readiness. I thought there was this great quote in there that really just captured the crux of the problem. It said, working in a coalition sometimes requires you to defer to a community-wide goal that may not directly align with your organization's current mission or strategy. So essentially, you're kind of sacrificing your individual goals for the larger whole. And it's this idea of more than the sum of its parts. So, you as an organization that is fitting into a larger whole, you're able to multiply your impact by, pooling your resources rather than trying to tackle it alone, which, as Kristen, laid out really beautifully, unfortunately, you all have been working really hard for a long time and not seen, potentially the results that you'd like to. So trying a more than the sum of its parts approach, could be a way to at least, try something different, right? See if this works. But I want to just give us a little bit of space to reflect on that. To what extent have you really thought about in your specific organization, its readiness to give up a little bit of that independence and autonomy? I thought that the coalition readiness questions that were in there were really helpful. And, I would encourage you all, I think, as homework to, if you haven't already, really sit and digest those questions, maybe even, share it with, people in your organization, kind of just start those conversations. Even if we're not entirely sure, where we're going, we don't know exactly what a collective partnership would look like. At least, starting to get prepare the ground for understanding why it's important and what your organization, could contribute to that process. And again, we're going to come back for discussion, but I'd like to actually go to the next slide as well and just introduce the idea that, we're probably not going to just form a perfectly integrated, finalized coalition overnight, right? There's levels of integration, there's levels of partnership. Very well could be that, our goal at the end of, this consultancy, for example, would be to have something that was not a full coalition, but another sort of partnership. And then a longer term goal could be full coalition. Really, essentially, I'd like us to kind of delve into what are the different levels of partnership, what are the different modalities that this could look like, and what is feasible for Kansas City, what is feasible for your organization. So Adam, do you want to unpack this slide a little bit?
Yeah, this is not an official thing. It's just something that I was working up similar to how Katina does it, where I have this ChatGPT conversation about everything we're talking about. And I wanted to ask it, what would be levels of integration? And this is this is a model it spit out. I mean, it's kind of a scale. You can almost picture it, from 1 to 7, maybe put 4 over here. And it's like, to what degree do we coalesce? Meaning to grow together? To what degree are we growing together? Are we going to become, will this form a complete organizational merger? All of us are going to join like Transformers and merge into one major robot. Obscure reference. All right. Or are we going to just remain? Do we think we can reach our outcomes? Because this is a methods question. Are we going to reach our outcomes? Really, it's which structure would best meet our outcomes. There's 2 questions. And then that's the first one, which structure would best meet our outcomes? And then, or what level of integration? And then is that level of integration feasible? And if so, how? So maybe handling those 2 questions separately, because, we'll come back to these, but as you read these questions, you might be like, yeah, I don't know. Some of these are pretty profound, and I may not like the answers, I don't know. I might be afraid of the answers, really, as I look at some of them. But this is being an agent of reality. What's the reality of your coalition? It's also why it's too early for people to be upset if they're not in the room right now, because we're still figuring out what this is. And I want to say too, while I have the mic, I think you all are engaging in an active leadership by when you all said, hey, we want to come together and at least talk about what it looks like, because this problem is bigger than any one of us. And I commend you for that active leadership. And it would upset me if you all were being punished for that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're somehow bad or elitist because you haven't invited everybody who touches on literacy to the table. Would be a very unfair statement about what this group's up to. Nothing has started yet. This is an exploratory thing. So I just wanted to maybe balance out some of the conversation, but bringing it back to this, yeah. And or April, are we opening up for reactions yet? Or have I talked about the things you wanted me to talk about? I guess I could have gone through each one, but I don't have time for that anymore, but hopefully you all read it. So I'll hand the mic back to you, April.
Yeah, no, I think that sets us up really beautifully. I dropped 2 questions in the chat, what level of integration would best meet our outcomes, and what level of integration is feasible right now, based on your organization. And I don't expect us to have perfect answers to these questions, but I'd like to hear from a couple people on what are your initial impressions, and is this intimidating to see, this levels of integration document, or is it helpful? I mean, yeah, give me some reactions on what we've talked about.
I think it's helpful in the sense of like putting it out on the table, because we might jump between, like I've been in situations where you jump between and you just think like you're starting all over, but it's essentially you're trying on each of the hats, like what works for right now. So I think it's helpful for us to not get so in depth or in intrinsic, like being so involved that we don't see that it's still working the system. It's just like we're still trying to figure out what fits.
That's great. Yeah. And kind of to that, I mean, does anybody have an impression of, again, you don't have to have the right answer, but like, oh man, based on that, I think we'd be really, well, a good fit for us could be this level of integration, or man, my organization would never go for that, or that seems like a big ask. Also, Adam, are we recording?
I was letting you know, I forgot to even stop recording, so it recorded even through the break. So yeah.
Great.
I think one of the strengths of Turn the Page KC is how lean and flexible our team is. We're really agile, and so I like seeing all these options on the table for different levels of coalescing. And I think that as like an organization that has a collective impact model at its core, that, knowing that we could, play a part in finding something that's flexible and adaptable for the rest of the community is really promising.
Yeah, I agree with Katina's point in the chat that I think 4 is like where we are headed and we could get to. And I think the jump from 4 to 5 and beyond is a little bit more logistical. That would require some more thinking and, who wants to take it there. But I think 4 feels like a good place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also kind of stemming off of the comment that at least Turn the Page is very lean and agile. I think my gut is we're all incredibly lean. I haven't met many organizations in the general field of educating children that have abundance of anything. And while I commit to that because of the agility it gives us, it's also exhausting. It's why I left education. It's exhausting. And I think we could all benefit by thinking not just about programmatic alignment, but on the non-programmatic side, like how could we all help each other by not duplicating every operational or facilities effort or whatever the stuff is. I mean, when I look at my calendar and think like, how much of my week do I actually spend thinking about how to help children read better? Like not nearly enough, not like, because there's just checks to be written and the stuff to be done and reports to write and that, and I think we could be a lot more efficient in those areas and give ourselves the opportunity to be the experts that we are in a lot of more meaningful ways.
I love that. So pooled resources in terms of, core operational functions. Sorry, Jitem, go ahead.
My initial thought is that I would like us to strive to be at 5, number 5. And then 5 jumps till 7. Like if we have shared way of approaching everything, we have the set curriculum all set. So essentially all of us are not duplicating services, but essentially saying, whatever my specialized population is, we're going to do the same curriculum. And then after we all see the curriculum saying, and we look for essentially kind of like as you all are consultants, then appointing, I don't know if it's like an ED over literacy in Kansas City, but having one entity to bring us in and maybe quarterly to just check on where we all are, to grab data from each of the organizations, to get fundraising from each of the organizations, or even map out a calendar for, look at me, map out a calendar for the year. Like there is one entity that holds all of that, but it can't happen unless we all agree that we're doing things, because I think that'll be too much that we all are different systems, all doing different, it's not going to help with the methodology or us to say what our outputs actually look like collectively. but to work toward having a systematic way of teaching and educating, and then say there's an entity to will oversee all of our literacy programs and also strengthen them by bringing funds in, or who essentially will, as people apply to be a part of the coalition, they'll see this is what the skill, this is who we need at the table, like as a whole, like, and that's their forefront of continuously to think through that. So those are my thoughts.
I agree. Level 5 is where we should try to go. I think 3 is the starting point. 4 is awesome. 5 would be really great. And I think that thinking more about potential benefits of things like co-location to gain efficiencies in operations, potentially using, overlapping accounting firms, that kind of stuff, I think there's a lot of benefit there, and I think that funders would react incredibly positively to that type of idea.
Katina, do you want to expand on your? Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with 5 as well. And I'm thinking about not only from this coalition perspective, this is like an issue throughout our city. So like if we can figure out how to make this work, it can also be adapted to other areas. That we can begin to address these issues where we have a lot of the overlapping and duplicative services and all that. So
not living in Kansas City, my sense is that it's a hotbed for emerging ways to coalesce, and there's different models that are being played with. And I think we're seeing, what I mean by a hotbed is that it's kind of groups are inspiring each other, whether they know it directly or not. And so it's almost like different models are being tested, and why not? I don't know what they've done for their models for the parents group, or I know there's one about renters' rights, right? So, I mean, these are different models. Yeah, right. And so maybe what you are also doing is participating in that, offering a model as well for other social needs, concerns.
Well, and I'd like to go back, and if I heard correctly, I'd like to appreciate and join in with Jitem's willingness to say, and maybe get to 7, because I do think that these are layers, and it's scary to think from moving from here and now to 7, but it's not scary to say first we get to 3 and then we get to 5, and then we think about like, what could it be even greater if we pushed forward. And like an analogy that may mean nothing to anyone but me is like, my husband and I have become very committed to planning our retirement. And that sounds so fun. And then you jump into it and you go like, shit, how do you plan like the rest of your life? Like, and I found I was freaking out. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to sit on the couch. Like, what are we going to do? Like, and when we finally said, let's plan the first 5 years of our retirement, and then we'll plan the next 5 years of retirement, whatever it, like it was like, oh, this I can do. I could imagine a 5-year plan. I can't imagine like what I hope to be a 25 or 30-year plan. So, but I think if we think that way too, we may push ourselves forward to something that looks more like 7, and it may not be this year. It may be quite a few years, who knows? But thank you, Jitem, for even saying number 7.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful framework. Sorry, Jitem, just real quick, in terms of like thinking in terms of, we have a runway for this, right? And it's something that we can work up to. And so I think maybe it was Jillian who said like data coordination, definitely, we got that. And, then we get to 4, 5, 6, and maybe 7, right? And so I like thinking in terms of like a 5-year plan. That could be a good focus for this group is stages of this. Jitem, please go ahead.
I think 7 is like, I wouldn't think the title is off-putting, like the merger. I can't see all of our organizations merging, but I can see that all of us look toward, at least in the first few years of funding, saying we can contribute X amount of dollars to this person to make sure that they are the umbrella and keeping us all accountable to what we said we will do. This one entity, whether it's a person or organization, we also look to saying, if there are red flags that are coming, like being able to hold all of that information and start strategizing, whether it's coming back and saying, well, we need another group of consultants to help us through this, like someone to be the point person to have dedicated time to making sure, again, that we are trying to alleviate illiteracy in Kansas City. Because those checks and everything else pile up, or meeting with board members, all of that piles up. So someone who's like, I don't have anything else on my plate, just to make sure all of you and your systems are working for the betterment of the whole.
And that is actually the later chapters of the coalition roadmap gets a little bit more into like the roles of a backbone organization and like how that could work in a couple different models. So we'll be able to really explore, you know, what different versions of something like that could look like. But that has been a best practice, is having dedicated staff time, you know, on this. Okay, guys. Well, any last kind of parting thoughts on this? This is something that we will continue to come back to. But this was our first introduction. Adam, Tom, and I were not quite sure what direction, you know, this conversation would take. And so I think we've tested the waters and we've gotten a good feel collectively for kind of where we are as a group, and we can build from here. And I think this will really help when we start to get into the outcome discussion, to have these frameworks in the back of our mind.
April, can I just say that this is my uncomfortable zone right here, these discussions, the far thinking, and I feel like I'm a visionary, but it, you know, I really appreciate the discussion. I really appreciate the input, and because I never thought of it the way that Jatim put it. I thought of it that way, but I didn't, but you said it so well. So but then it like kind of makes me like, well, what's next though? How do we get there? Like, and like Christian said, no, take it back, bite-sized pieces. So I do appreciate the process, and I do appreciate the vision and everyone's different talents to be able to get there.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I've been telling Adam, like every 2 days, I'm like, we have to make this achievable for people. We can't make it scary. You know, we have to break it down. And so I really hope that we're helping everybody to kind of think of it in those terms. And that's definitely our motivation. Every big change starts with a small one, right? All right. Well, that said, I think we're moving on to purpose statement. Adam, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. So that's what we're trying to do here with you all, is if our purpose is here and our outcomes are out here, then we want to get to our through line, which we have to figure out our strategies, tactics, and actions or operations. I call these together methods. These are 3 levels of methods. And we'll get into that, not to worry, big rocks are the strategies, smaller rocks are the tactics, and then, the little pebbles are the actions, and that's what produce our outcomes. So we want to have a clear through line, and it really does start with purpose. It really does. It is the why. Purpose is the why. Purpose is the origin. It's the beginnings. And outcomes are the expressions of what it looks like when you've played the movie forward and you've successfully done the things that reflected the purpose, and now you see it in your outcomes. We will get to methods soon. That's where we want to get to, because this is where we can do things about it. But we're setting it up for success. So the first part of that is the purpose. We have 3 statements. Yeah, and I think what we're trying to do here is maybe lock in our purpose. Is that?
Yeah, so I can step in. So yeah, I think over the break, we asked you all to review these purpose statements. We're trying to hone in on one final purpose statement. I think these are all kind of circling around the same, core vision, but just like slightly different takes on capturing it in words. So yeah. Let's take a couple of minutes to unpack this. What reflections did you have over the break on these statements? Anybody want to really advocate for one statement?
Would it be good to just read them out loud? I know we all can read, but maybe just hearing it out loud, would that help? Yes, no?
Yeah, okay. Do you want to
Okay.
do it, Adam, or do you want me to?
Our purpose as a coalition is to concentrate collective resources towards building a sustainable infrastructure, making Kansas City a model literate city where literacy empowers every individual. Number 2, we aim to utilize our collective resources to establish Kansas City as the model literate city where lifelong learning is accessible and valued by all community members. Number 3, our coalition is focused on harnessing our combined resources to create a sustainable system that positions Kansas City as the exemplar of a literate, empowered community.
I'll just jump in and say, I like number 2. The language is a little more accessible and it seems to set a clearer vision of where we're going, where we get to, whereas the others seem to focus more on the process of getting there, as I hear it.
I also like number 2, partly because of the idea of those collective resources and partly because of the word accessible. I think both of those things appeal to me.
I agree. That was the one that I would advocate for as well, for the same reasons.
Anybody not like number 2? Or prefer something else? Prefer another one up there? Or a version that's not even up there? Okay. Does this mean we're honing in on our purpose statement, which is really exciting if it's true? Does this pass the good enough test, which is, you know, we can live with this for now, and if we need to come back to it, we'll come back to it? See some nods. Okay, great. Well, if you guys are good with it, I'm good with it.
Yeah, this here?
We have a winner. Yay,
All right.
confetti.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then that said, we can move on to outcomes, I think. And so over the break, we asked you all to meet with your groups to create a updated draft of your list of outcomes. So I think at this point, we'd just like for the groups to go group by group, and you can maybe share your screen and talk through your outcomes with us. So is there a group that would like to go first?
Our group will go first. Right, ladies? Let me share screen. Hang on, I wasn't expecting to do that. Just a sec. I don't know. I mean, we just kept our notes right on the original brainstorm page. Did everybody else? So maybe you could just share it centrally, Adam or April.
Sure. Yeah, give me a sec to pull it up, or if you have the link already, if you want to drop it in chat for everybody.
Okay.
While that's coming up, what's an easy way to get to Basecamp? Do you have like an app or something? Because I always go through the emails and just like, which one of these are Basecamp, and then click, and that's how I go through.
It's on my phone, but I also
there is an app.
You can.
bookmark it.
That's all I needed.
I bookmark it on my computer.
I think
Gotcha,
you can
thank
put basecamp.com, Google it,
Yeah.
and it'll go right to it too.
What group Chris?
2.
2. Oh, there you go, right there.
Okay, so we were pretty sure that having written this, we had solved the problems of the world. And as I reflect on it, I think we pushed ourselves to kind of stay at at a level, a high level, rather than getting into the weeds about like how much, how many, how long. But we ended up breaking our thinking into, I think there's a third section down below. I don't know who's, sorry. Yeah, into sort of 3 different areas. So sorry, scroll back up. The first focused on acquisition of language and literacy skills. So at each developmental level of life, the citizens of Kansas City will have the language or reading skills they need to be successful, or they will have access to the tools and resources to achieve language and reading success. And then we really just focused on like, what are all of those, what I wrote as developmental levels. I think that was my language. And have we encompassed, when we kind of look at how we talked about this group representing across the second has more to do with the notions we've talked about well, everybody, and make sure that everyone in the community understands the reason that this matters and is important. So citizens of Kansas City will be aware of the need and benefit of literacy at all developmental levels of life. And then we added under that sort of what are all the different types of literacy that we need to make sure people think about as literacy becomes the focus. And then finally, every sector of the community, and we named a few there, has a clear pathway to engagement and investment in the process. So making sure that this is truly a way to involve everyone meaningfully in solving the breadth of what the problem is. Shatam and Jillian, please jump in or redirect.
I think you did beautifully. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
Right, any reactions from the group? Okay. Hearing none, we can go ahead and move on to the next group, and then we'll look at everything holistically.
Thank you, Katina.
You want to go? Lauren, Kate, Kim?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so we're group 3. So I think I'm navigating, so somebody else can talk.
So I think that in our group, we were thinking like getting these ready to be put on a strategic plan. Getting them the wording ready to show up. We did, none of these numbers were set in stone. We were really trying to focus on crafting SMART SMART goals, which is why we included some lengths of time and some percentages, but that was just for ease of sentence crafting. So the first one is by 2025, 5 organizations outside of the education space will be coalition members in some capacity. So that's speaking to our goal of bringing in people from outside the education and literacy sector. Our second one was within the next 5 years, achieve a 25% increase in literacy rates amongst all KCMO residents. This is, one of those big, like thinking audaciously, thinking about what is really our end goal, and how can we represent that in an outcome statement. Our third one, within 2 years, increase the range of culturally diverse books and other literacy building materials in the KC metro area by 50%. That is kind of like more initiative based, but we were also thinking of like, how can we represent the mission of different organizations and really bring in people who's, you know, like our libraries and our school libraries who, you know, that's what their, you know, their job is based around. Increase adult enrollment in non-traditional and continuing education learning environments by 30% in the next 3 years. And just making sure that we're covering all aspects of the lifespan and making sure that we're not leaving out our adult learners as well. Ensuring 80% of children entering kindergarten have the necessary pre-literacy skills to be confident and competent readers by 3rd grade. And this could encompass, you know, all kinds of birth to 5 necessities. And then finally ensuring that a certain percentage of all types of classrooms and learning environments integrate technology in learning programs within 3 years to enhance literacy. And this like specifically addressing the digital divide and viewing access to high-speed internet as the same way we view access to gas, water, electricity, because that it really is a public utility that people need to survive at this point. Does anyone else in the team want to tag on to anything? Okay.
Thank you so much, Lauren and Katina. Any reactions from the group on this one?
I'll just say that for somebody who does strategic planning a lot, I love the way you wrote these with real tangible, you know, smart goals. I mean, they're great job. I mean, it just really makes it very specific.
Thanks. We were trying to make it feel real.
Yeah. All right, last group, last but not least. It looks like I think Katie or Jenny, Ms. Tina and Linda have to step out.
I can jump in. I'll give it a go. So we just kind of took some of the things we were working on before and reworded them. So our revised ones are down there, so you can kind of see the colors coordinate of what we tried to reflect on. So we wanted to create one that was focused on the ongoing nature of this group. We thought that would be an important outcome. So again, you can see what we wrote there. The second one was about data sharing, which kind of tucks back into what we were just talking about, how we would progress. I think we had the idea of like sharing data as a key point. And then our last one involved legislative stakeholders and how to bring that on to like our next level of, you know, the spheres of people that we need to get involved in what we're doing. So we did not get specific into our approach to those things or any measurable outcomes towards them, but again, really large scale thinking. It's really interesting how we've all definitely approached this differently in the 3 groups, which is great to see, but probably a mix of all of this is the answer somewhere. So anyway, I loved learning from the other groups as well. And feel free to add anything to that, Jenny, if you have.
No, that's great. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I'll tell you what I've been doing in the background. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the tool Miro. I'm going to steal the screen share out. But this is an online tool, a collaborative tool that if you all would like, we can get you, you know, access to this as well. But for the purposes of not giving you another technological thing to figure out, we just skip that part this time. But I've taken all of the outcomes and thrown them up on sticky notes on the collective screen. And, you know, essentially what we'd like to do with this is identify some patterns, like what are some commonalities out of, you know, the outcomes that you all populated that you see, maybe what are some differences. But essentially, I'd love to be able to cluster these based on, you know, patterns that you guys are seeing. So does anyone want to kick that off? Yeah.
I would say before clustering, my brain, I don't know if it's the ED brain, but essentially, Katie, as you were saying, how you saw all of us approached it differently. Things that we have to check with each other. Group 2 being the LOI, this is what like initial of interest, this is what we're trying to do. Our map parts of the timeline. I'll turn it back to you, April, because you want to categorize it. But I was like, oh, it's like we already have the whole process mapped out.
No, that's great. I mean, that's what I'm asking for, is to draw connections between what you all have created and how it all fits together and talks to each other. So that's definitely true. And yeah, looking at that list, I think there's different, like, levels of specificity, of course, some zoomed in and some zoomed out. Some maybe are a little bit more focused on methods, for example, than others. But again, we're looking for, what progress and success looks like. But yeah, any other, I guess just reactions, we only have a couple minutes left, but reactions to those outcomes on the board.
Can you put Miro back up, or was this gonna be homework?
Let's see where we get in 5 minutes, and then we'll see what's homework. But yeah, did you have any reactions, Katina, or anybody?
I don't know if it's something I could do off the top of my head, but I don't know if any of the third groups, more concrete examples could tuck underneath any of the other ones or start to kind of explain. I'd have to look at it. It's not something I can do in real time, but I think we could probably find some of those associations where we've got a vision of where we're going, and this is how we might actually see if we've achieved it.
Yeah, essentially. Oh, go ahead.
I'd love this to be homework so we can, I don't know if you can give us access to your board or not, where we move things around, or if we create our own, it's fine. But I would love to be able to kind of hands-on move them and manipulate them and all the things. And then when we come back together, determine if we think that's the right fit or the right organization that it needs to be.
Sure. Yeah, I think logistically it might be hard to get everybody trained up on Miro over the break. But that'll be something that Tom and Adam and I will think about in terms of a way for you guys to progress this. And we'll, I think, probably just announce on Basecamp this evening kind of the next steps in terms of how to progress this. But essentially,
you can share them. I'm sure we all know Jamboard, or I think even in Google Suite we can move stuff around. So yeah, as long as we have a visual to see, then I think we're good.
Yeah. And then I think one kind of another layer of this is creating indicators. So when you're creating your SMART outcomes, which I know Lauren's group did a great job of, these are kind of like specific indicators that we're hitting kind of the higher level outcomes, right? And so essentially the way that we traditionally organize this is kind of higher level outcomes and then indicators, specific, tangible, SMART, measurable, proof that those things are being achieved, or, specific targets that you're going for. And so that's a way to organize it. We can provide a couple of examples as well. But good. I think maybe for the purpose of this conversation, we'll wrap up outcomes there. And yeah, we'll post kind of more specific homework on Basecamp. So yeah, back to Adam. Do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I do. Tom, April, and I will reflect on the outcomes you provided us. I think there's a lot of information in there. I know it looks like we have maybe, I don't know, what looked like roughly like 10-ish or so outcomes, but there's a lot more in there. Like if we take the one about kindergartners, okay, that now one, we just make it a heading and we say, what else youth, like early childhood related outcomes? And out of that, we could probably generate many specific outcomes you all would like to see. So each one of those sticky notes represents that potential. It tells Tom, April, and I what you all are thinking in terms of where you want this to end up. So I think we can probably advance it a little bit too, and you as well do the same. But we're in the right sandbox right now. Yeah, and the key is, do each of these outcomes, do they reflect the purpose that we agreed upon today? So yeah, it all is coming together. Let's take this time to just reflect on how we did today. So when I think of pluses and deltas, I think of pluses as that which contributed to progress. Not just did I like it, did it contribute to progress? And deltas aren't did I not like it, deltas are did it detract from progress? So that's all. All right. So any pluses or deltas from today? Let's start with I know people like to do let's do deltas first, or I frankly treat it as whichever comes to mind for you. We can go back and forth.
We have a good enough purpose statement. That seems like a win for the day.
Thanks. All right, what else?
This discussion is so big and so exciting. I feel like we need more time on this, so that could be a delta in a good way. It's a good problem.
I call that a plelta.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But right. It was good and we needed more time. So yeah, it fits really in both. Well, I'm going to put it in a plus. Great conversation, worthy of more time. Good. Other pluses or deltas? I thought, Lauren, you started us off with some self-disclosure and vulnerability about your early leadership experience. And I thought that really set the tone for a very, rich conversation. That's all right. If you don't mind me putting that there as plus. Thank you. Thank you. Other pluses or deltas?
I think the process we've done a couple of times now where we break off in groups, we work with a group, we bring it back and then hear for other groups are doing. Really highlights the different ways we think, kind of what Katie pointed out or Jatem pointed out. I forget who said what, but so I think it's a plus that we have sort of these iterative processes for working closely with a small group and hearing from others in that way too.
Love it. Thank you. Good. Other pluses or deltas or pleltas?
I enjoyed the conversation and dialogue around leadership today. I wonder if it falls probably on a delta for me. I think if it took up a significant chunk of time, that maybe took away from the last part that we did in terms of like our outcomes and stuff like that. So just thinking about how we set up the agenda, what we wanted to accomplish, and then did we actually get there? I would say the conversation. So we need to, I guess, be more cognizant about our sidebars and the breadth of some of the conversations we have.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Other pluses or deltas or pleltas?
I love the integration document because I don't recall seeing that in the actual reading. So you said Adam, I think said he pulled that up using ChatGPT. I love that document. To kind of, that was really helpful. Like where do we see ourselves and then where could we potentially go? I think that was wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Any others? Oh, this is out of date. Sorry. This so any reminders or announcements or homework for next time?
Yeah, so I'll be posting, like I said, some instructions on how we're going to ask you to progress the outcomes. So stay posted on that. We will have more reading about coalitions. And I'd like to challenge you to take another look at that organizational document and just really sit with them, draft down, like we're not gonna ask to see the answers, but draft some answers for you. Have lunch with a staff member and talk through it, it kind of pave the way for more serious discussions that will come down the line. All right, any last thoughts before we close?
I've read across a few really, really good articles in the last several days around literacy on a national level. is it okay if I post that for you all in the base camp? Some of those articles, I think they're great. So I was like, oh, I want to share these, but I was like, any more reading?
Absolutely.
I'll do more reading.
I want to give everybody permission to share any resources that you think will be helpful. And, you know, hopefully over time we can be developing a library of these things. That's very much within the scope of what we're doing together. So thank you, Katina.
Yeah, we'll just have like a literacy, you know, just create, if there doesn't already exist, just create literacy resources and then drop, anybody drop things in there. I'm glad you asked. That's great. All right, y'all, we're done. So we want to respect your time. What a great, rich conversation about so many things. So we'll be seeing you here next time.
Stay
for our
warm,
next-
guys. Don't slip on the ice. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.